Pain, we avoid it, we resist it, we try to numb it. But what if every pain you've ever felt, physical, emotional, even spiritual, was actually a message? What if, as Carl Jung believed, pain isn't something to be silenced, but something to be interpreted? Jung didn't see pain as a mistake or punishment. He saw it as symbolic. To him, suffering wasn't random. It was the psyche's way of trying to get your attention, not to destroy you, but to initiate you, because beneath every ache, every heartbreak, every breakdown, there's meaning. The body aches where the soul is unheard. Let's start with something simple. You have recurring stomach pain. Doctors say there's no clear medical reason. But emotionally, you've been swallowing your truth for years. You avoid conflict. You suppress anger. You play peacemaker while your needs remain unmet. Jung would say that pain in your gut isn't just digestion. It's digestion of your unspoken emotions. This is the language of the unconscious. It speaks through metaphor, through symptoms, through the very body you inhabit. And when your conscious mind refuses to listen, the unconscious will find a way to speak through discomfort. Now let's go deeper. Emotional pain, loss, betrayal, rejection. These aren't just unfortunate events. They're invitations. Invitations to uncover what part of yourself you've neglected, disowned, or projected onto others. Jung believed that behind every emotional wound lies a spiritual lesson. If you've been betrayed, for example, the pain isn't just about what someone did. It's also about what you gave away. Your trust, your boundaries, your intuition. The wound calls you back to yourself. This is the core of Jungian psychology, the individuation process, a journey toward becoming whole. But wholeness doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from walking through it, from listening, from decoding its message. Let's say you're chronically tired, unmotivated, disconnected. You might call it burnout, but Jung would ask, what part of you has been living a lie? What dream did you abandon to meet others' expectations? Spiritual fatigue often comes not from doing too much, but from doing what's misaligned. Your pain is not your enemy, it's your teacher. And the more you ignore it, the louder it gets, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. We live in a world that pathologizes pain. Pop a pill, scroll your feed, distract yourself. But Jung taught, what you resist persists. Suppression doesn't heal. Suppression separates you from the truth that pain is trying to reveal. So the next time pain shows up, don't just ask, how do I stop this? Ask, what is this trying to teach me? Because pain, in Jung's world, isn't a failure of the self. It's the voice of the soul, demanding to be heard. Let's go deeper into the Jungian idea that pain is symbolic. Carl Jung once said, neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, when we don't allow ourselves to feel the real pain, we develop dysfunctional patterns as a way to cope. Anxiety, depression, addiction, obsession, these are not random disorders. They are the psyche's desperate attempt to process the unprocessed. Let's say someone suffers from constant anxiety. On the surface, it might look like a mental health issue. But Jung would ask, what unspoken truth are you running from? What inner conflict have you ignored for so long that your body has become hypervigilant, scanning for danger in every situation? He believed that when the conscious mind represses difficult emotions or inconvenient truths, the unconscious takes over, and it doesn't whisper, it screams. Through panic attacks, through recurring nightmares, through irrational fears, not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants to wake you up. The same is true with depression. Jung didn't see it as just a chemical imbalance. He saw it as a loss of connection with the soul, a deep sense that life has become hollow, meaningless, or misaligned. He believed that depression often arises when we are no longer living in integrity with our inner self. When we've abandoned our true path for one that's more socially acceptable, safe, or predictable. He wrote about the dark night of the soul, not as a problem to fix, but as a sacred phase, a passage, a confrontation with everything false. When you're in this space, it can feel like the end. But to Jung, it was actually the beginning, because what emerges from the darkness is not your old self, polished and put back together. What emerges is something deeper, your true self stripped of illusion, grounded in truth. And here's the irony. Our culture teaches us to fear pain, to escape it, to medicate it. But Jung taught that pain is sacred, that every wound is a portal, that healing isn't about returning to who you were. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. So when pain shows up again, and it will try asking different questions, not, how do I make this stop? But, what have I ignored? Not, how do I distract myself? But, what needs to be faced? Your soul doesn't speak in words. It speaks in symbols, in patterns, in pain. Jung didn't just want us to feel better. He wanted us to understand why we hurt in the first place. Because when pain becomes conscious, it becomes transformative. Now, let's shift to a practical level. The body. Jung didn't see the body and mind as separate. He believed they were mirrors of each other. When you experience physical pain or illness, especially of the chronic or mysterious kind, it often reflects a deeper emotional or spiritual conflict. You may develop a sore throat over and over again, not because of a virus, but because you consistently silence yourself. You don't speak up. You fear your truth will upset others, and so the body carries the burden. Jung would say this isn't a coincidence. The throat becomes a metaphor, a physical location where your repressed voice, your unexpressed truth, manifests into discomfort. Your body is telling the story that your voice will not. Take another example. Chronic back pain, especially in the lower back. It's often linked to feelings of being unsupported financially, emotionally, relationally. If you've spent your life carrying other people, emotionally or otherwise, your body may start to mimic that weight. Pain becomes the echo of emotional labor gone unacknowledged. Jung believed these patterns weren't random. He saw illness as a symbolic message, a kind of dream from the body. And like all dreams, it required interpretation. This doesn't mean we abandon medicine or science. Jung wasn't anti-science, but he believed healing must be holistic, that we should treat not just the symptoms, but the story behind the symptom, the why behind the what. You may have heard the phrase, the body keeps the score. Jung knew this long before it became popular. He taught that if trauma isn't metabolized psychologically, it becomes stored somatically. And eventually, the body will ask the question the mind keeps avoiding. What is this pain trying to protect me from? What boundary have I failed to set? What grief have I buried in my muscles, my joints, my skin? These are not easy questions. But Jung never promised that the inner journey would be easy. He only promised it would be real. And when we finally stop seeing pain as a punishment and start seeing it as communication, we change everything. We stop fighting ourselves. We stop resenting our symptoms. We become curious, compassionate, present. And in that presence, something new becomes possible. Healing that's not just physical, but soulful. Because as Jung taught us, you don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. One of Jung's most powerful insights was this: every pain holds the seed of transformation, but only if we're willing to feel it, to sit with it, to ask it what it wants from us. He didn't see emotional suffering as a sign of weakness or failure. He saw it as the natural byproduct of awakening. He understood that when your inner world no longer fits the outer life you've built, friction arises, and that friction is often felt as anxiety, discontent, restlessness, or what many experience as a crisis, a midlife crisis, a spiritual crisis, a relationship collapse, a career burnout. But Jung believed these breakdowns are actually breakthroughs in disguise. They're not the end of your path. They're the end of the false path, the path built on expectations, projections, and unconscious patterns. When that path crumbles, it hurts deeply, but it also clears the way for a more authentic life to emerge. And here's where Jung's concept of the shadow becomes so vital. The shadow is everything within us that we've rejected, suppressed, or disowned. Not just our bad parts, but our power, our creativity, our voice, our sexuality. We exile these parts of ourselves because they don't match the image we've been taught to present to the world. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It festers, and it often expresses itself through pain, mental, emotional, even physical. Jung said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. Think about that. How much of your current pain is rooted not in what's happening, but in what's unacknowledged? How much of your suffering is the result of avoiding hard truths about who you are, what you want, or what you've outgrown? Jung's approach was never about fixing people. It was about helping them see themselves clearly, see their patterns, see their projections, and take responsibility for their inner world. And through that seeing, a profound kind of freedom arises. Because when pain becomes a teacher instead of an enemy, everything shifts. We no longer ask life to be easy. We ask it to be honest. We stop chasing numbness and start pursuing wholeness. Wholeness, Jung said, includes the pain. It doesn't deny it. It integrates it. It honors it. It listens to it. So the next time pain visits you not as a monster, but as a messenger, ask, what are you trying to show me? What part of me have I forgotten? What truth have I been afraid to speak? Because the deeper you listen, the more you'll hear the wisdom beneath the wound. Let's take a moment to acknowledge how revolutionary Jung's view of pain really is. In a world obsessed with comfort, speed, and good vibes only, Jung invites us into something far more radical: integration. He didn't believe in bypassing darkness. He believed in entering it consciously, courageously, because that's where the gold is. There's even a term in Jungian psychology, the wounded healer. It describes someone who becomes capable of helping others, not because they've avoided pain, but because they've transformed it. They've descended into their own suffering, faced their shadow, and emerged with insight. If you've ever felt like your pain was pointless, let this be your reminder. Pain can become medicine, not just for you, but for others. Because once you understand your suffering, you develop compassion, empathy, wisdom. You begin to recognize the pain in others, not with pity, but with presence. This is why Jung placed such emphasis on symbolism and dreams. He believed your unconscious wants to help you heal. But it doesn't speak in plain language. It speaks through symbols, patterns, and repetition. Often, what appears as meaningless suffering is actually your psyche trying to guide you toward growth. For example, recurring dreams of falling, drowning, being chased. These are not random. They often reflect inner fears of losing control, being overwhelmed, or avoiding something important. Jung would say, don't just analyze the dream. Feel what it evokes. Let it point you toward the unresolved emotion. Or take repeating life patterns, like constantly attracting unavailable partners, or always ending up in jobs that drain you. To Jung, these aren't accidents. They're signals. Your pain is looping because the lesson hasn't been integrated. And what's the lesson? That you are not a victim of your pain. You are its interpreter, its translator, its alchemist. You get to choose whether your pain becomes a prison or a portal. Because when you begin to see pain, not as a curse, but as a compass, your entire life reorganizes. You stop running from discomfort. You start listening to it. And in that listening, you'll find the messages meant only for you. Carl Jung didn't want you to escape pain. He wanted you to understand it, because that's where your real power lives. Let's now talk about one of Jung's most powerful ideas. The task is not to eliminate pain, but to find meaning within it. To Jung, meaning is not optional, it's essential. A life without meaning becomes hollow, unbearable. But when pain is infused with meaning, it becomes not just tolerable, but transformative. This is where many people get stuck. They want to heal, but they expect healing to feel like light and bliss. Jung taught the opposite. He believed that true healing often begins in darkness, in descent, in cracking open. You don't find meaning by escaping the pain. You find meaning by facing it head-on, by asking, what part of me needs to die for something new to be born? This is the symbolic death Jung referred to often. The death of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted. The death of old identities that no longer serve us. And yes, it feels like loss, because it is loss, but it's also liberation. Because what emerges is something far more authentic, your soul essence, the self that no longer lives to perform, please, or pretend, but to live, fully and freely. Jung believed that suffering, when brought into consciousness, creates space for rebirth. And this rebirth isn't a return to the old self. It's the arrival of a deeper, wiser self, a self rooted in truth. And this is why your pain matters, because someone, somewhere, is struggling in silence with the exact wound you've been healing. And your willingness to face your own pain gives them permission to do the same. Your pain, when alchemized, becomes your purpose. So don't hide it, don't minimize it, honor it, write about it, talk about it. Share what you've learned, not to gain sympathy, but to offer wisdom. Because your healing is never just about you. It ripples. And if you've made it this far, if you've had the courage to feel what you've tried so hard not to feel, then you are already walking the path Jung pointed toward. You're not running, you're integrating. And in that integration, you're becoming whole. So here's the final truth Jung would want you to remember. Pain is not your enemy. It is your initiation, your teacher, your compass back to the parts of you that have been forgotten, silenced, or shamed. You are not broken because you hurt. You are awakening. You are evolving. You are remembering who you are beneath the masks and roles, beneath the trauma and conditioning. And if you're still in the midst of your pain, that's okay. Jung would say, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That includes accepting the pain, not romanticizing it, not rushing through it, but simply being with it. Because in being with it, you become bigger than it. And one day, you'll look back, not with bitterness, but with reverence. You'll see that your pain didn't destroy you. It revealed you. If this message touched something in you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Somewhere, someone is still suffering in silence, and your share might be the light they need.